Surya, you muted yourself.
Why, now are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Start presenting.
Anush, 9 months old male child from Triplicane, accompanied by his mother, whose reliability is good, has come with chief complaints of a progressive increase in head size since 6 months of age and complaints of vomiting and poor feeding for the past 2 days.
Okay.
History of presenting illness. History of vomiting 6 to 8 episodes in the past 2 days, which is projectile in nature. History of poor feeding or reduced oral intake for the past 2 days. There's also history of
Okay.
irritability for the past 2 days, and there are
Okay.
no history of fever or seizures, no history of
Okay.
trauma, no history of cough, breathing difficulty or weight
No.
loss, no history of cyanotic spell.
Okay. Why have you asked this history of cyanotic spell for this case?
For any associated heart defects.
The presenting complaints are vomiting, increase in head size, and poor feeding. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So, cyanotic spell history, is it relevant for this case? Not much, no?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, continue.
Antenatal history. Mother was registered at local PHC
Okay, Surya,
and
just a minute. Okay, see, so now we have actually got two cases for discussion today. One is microcephaly and the other is hydrocephalus. Okay, hydrocephalus usually is kept as a short case. Okay, and now you have told the complaints of increase in head size. Okay, so that is increase in head size is macrocephaly, and the other symptoms you have told are vomiting and refusal of feeds. So what are all the presenting complaints of hydrocephalus? Surya, what are the presenting complaints of hydrocephalus?
vomiting.
Is it vomiting first? Okay.
Some headache it can be.
Yes, okay, fine. Then
Delay in development.
delayed
development delays.
development. Okay. Now, with regard to presenting complaints, we can take it as in infancy and in older children. Okay. In infancy means usually the presenting complaint will be, the most common presenting complaint will be the mother notices an increase in head circumference. I mean the head size. Okay. Usually there is an increase in the head size, whereas in an older child, the sutures and all will be closed. So the increase in head size will not may not occur and it will not be appreciated. Okay, so what will happen? The child will have complaints of headache and then irritability. Then feeding will become poor, and then if that is a school-going child, there will be deterioration in school performance. Okay, so the manifestations will depend upon the age of the child. Okay, and with regard to vomiting, presence of vomiting indicates that there is an increased intracranial tension. Yes, but that is projectile vomiting, especially present in the early morning. Okay,
Yes,
understood?
yes.
Okay. Then what other complaints you will, what other history you will ask in the history of present illness? Here you have to elaborate about the increase in head size, and then you have told it is a 9-month-old child. The symptoms have been noticed from 6 months of age. So before 6 months of age, we don't know whether the mother, we don't know how the head size was, and the mother, how she noted it. Okay. So you will ask before that what happened, whether there was any history suggestive of trauma, any head trauma, because intraventricular hemorrhage or following trauma, there can be subdural hematoma, which can cause increase in head circumference. Okay. And then
Yes, ma'am.
whether any infections have occurred, that is suggestive of meningitis. So history of fever, seizures, alteration in sensorium, that history you should ask. Okay. And then what other history you will ask? Other than that, you will ask for any CNS. You have finished general medicine, no? You have finished general medicine posting?
No, ma'am. This is the
No, okay, then no problem. See, for when you examine a central nervous system case, in the history of present illness, you will ask history pertaining to motor function, pertaining to sensory system, pertaining to the 12 cranial nerves, pertaining to the cerebellum. But then you should also ask history suggestive of increased intracranial tension. Okay. And apart from that, you will also ask history to assess the higher mental functions like sensorium, then speech, gait. Okay. So in this child, with regard to the motor system, Rotina, you will ask about how whether the child is able to move the head, whether the child is able to sit without support, whether the child is able to turn on the bed on both sides, and then whether the child is able to use the upper limbs for proximal and distal, whether the child is able to lift the arms above the head, whether the child is able to hold on to a biscuit, whether he is able to take it to the mouth. Okay. And with regard to the sensory system, whether the child cries when injections are given. With regard to the cerebellum, whether there is any 9-month-old child, you cannot ask about walking and all, but you can ask whether there is any head nodding, titubation, whether it is present. And a 9-month-old child should be able to take a biscuit to his mouth. Okay, whatever they are given in the hand, they will take it to the mouth. Well, they take it, whether they do it without any overshooting. So that you will ask. Okay, and then you will ask also history of bladder and bowel disturbances. Of course, in this child you cannot ask because bladder control will not be attained. And okay, and then what else? So history suggestive of increased ICT. That already you have told that there is one symptom which is vomiting is there, you told. So in an older child, you will ask history of headache, vomiting, especially early morning projectile vomiting, visual disturbances you should ask. And then you will ask history suggestive of etiology. So for hydrocephalus, what are all the known etiology? It can be congenital. Okay, so this child also, it can be congenital or acquired. Why I am telling congenital also is, the onset is 6 months of age. But till now, am I clear, Pa?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Am I clear or should I go a little bit slow? You please tell, because see, I'm not seeing you, no, I'm not able to assess how you are all listening or not. Okay, so only you have to tell me.
Clear, ma'am.
Am I clear? One of you
Yes,
answer,
ma'am.
no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so history suggestive of etiology. So with regard to etiology, why I am telling in this congenital also it can be there, because before 6 months the mother may not have noticed. She would have thought it is normal. Okay, and then apart from congenital, neonatal meningitis history, already that history suggestive of meningitis we have asked. Okay, history suggestive of trauma we have asked. Okay, and then you go to the antenatal history. Okay, now present the antenatal history. Surya, present the antenatal history.
Yes. No history of hypertension, diabetes, or exanthematous fever.
Okay,
No history of drug intake,
okay,
radiation.
very good.
Vaccination done in 4th and 5th month.
Okay,
Iron and folic acid tablets taken regularly.
okay. Anything else?
Natal
Okay, now we'll stop with this. Okay, now antenatal history, what all you will ask? So now again think of the etiology in hydrocephalus. Okay, hydrocephalus can be part of any neural tube defect, and so you will also ask whether the mother has had any previous pregnancies of children with a neural tube defect like anencephaly or spina bifida. Okay, and also you will ask whether the mother has taken iron and folic acid tablets and the compliance is good, because it is the folic acid component which is important to prevent neural tube defect. Okay, and then what are all the intrauterine infections where you can get hydrocephalus? Cytomegalovirus, there is usually microcephaly, but as part of any intrauterine infection, you can get hydrocephalus. So, what is the history you will ask? It is just like any other flu-like illness. Okay, just fever, one mild myalgia or body pain. Toxoplasmosis. Among the tox infections, toxoplasmosis more commonly causes hydrocephalus. So, how will you ask history for toxoplasmosis? Whether the mother has had any contact with pets, dogs, cats. Okay. And then you will also ask history suggestive of rubella. For rubella, how will you ask the history? Whether the mother has had fever, then swelling behind the ears, that is posterior auricular lymphadenopathy, and then rash, then joint symptoms. Okay, so that is for rubella. So you will ask history suggestive of toxoplasmosis, rubella, cytomegalovirus, and then you will ask history of radiation exposure. Okay, and now since today's class is also about microcephaly, these history is relevant for microcephaly also, because in microcephaly the causes of microcephaly are the intrauterine infections, radiation exposure, then history of fever in the especially in the first trimester. Hyperpyrexia per se is considered to be a teratogen. Okay. Okay. Then what else? With regard to the yes, one another history you should ask, polyhydramnios, because when they are having neural tube defects, open neural tube defects, because of the CSF leak, they can have polyhydramnios. Okay, and then you go on to the natal history. Okay, so in natal history, what all you will ask?
Natal history, full term normal vaginal delivery with no complications.
Okay. Yes, then?
Postnatal, cried immediately.
Wait. Okay, so what are all the relevant points you should ask in natal history? In natal history, you should ask whether it is a preterm delivery or a term delivery. Why? Because in a preterm delivery, they are more prone to develop intraventricular hemorrhage. How does intraventricular hemorrhage cause hydrocephalus? The blood inside the ventricles. Okay, it can clot. These clots can obstruct the ventricular system, and then this when these clots they can get organized and they can result in fibrosis and gliosis occurring within the intraventricular pathways. So in preterm delivery per se is a risk factor for hydrocephalus. And then you should also ask about the duration of labor, because precipitate labor, okay, without passing through all that the stages of labor, precipitate labor also can predispose to intraventricular hemorrhage and hydrocephalus. Apart from that, if the hydrocephalus is of intrauterine onset, because of the large head, there can be cephalopelvic disproportion and history of difficult labor, history of instrumental delivery, okay, and history of malpresentations and malpositions. Okay, because a normal child only can revert and come to the cephalic position during before delivery. Okay, if the head is big, they can go in for a breech delivery. Okay, so and there can be difficulty in delivery of the aftercoming head. And apart from that, in non-cephalic deliveries, when there is difficulty in aftercoming head, the because of increased risk of instrumental delivery, and because of the birth trauma, they are more prone to develop intraventricular hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, and subdural effusion, subdural hemorrhage, and all can go on to develop hydrocephalus. Okay, and then yes, that is about the natal history. Now tell about the postnatal history or the neonatal history.
Postnatal history, cried immediately with a birth weight of 3.2 kg.
Yes.
No NICU admission.
Now, the birth weight is also important, because If hydrocephalus is part of intrauterine infections, they can be small for gestational age babies. Okay. Okay, then.
No NICU admissions.
Okay.
Baby was breastfed 1 hour after delivery.
Okay.
Exclusively breastfed for 7 months.
Okay. Then. So in the newborn history, what history we should ask? We should ask again history of neonatal meningitis, presence of any fever and neonatal seizures. Okay, whether there is any history of NICU admissions. So because in microcephaly, it is any insult to the developing brain can result in cerebral atrophy and microcephaly. Okay, side by side, I will also tell the points for microcephaly. Okay. Okay, then. And in natal history also, you will ask the mother whether there was any fever during the 3rd trimester, history of foul-smelling liquor, because intrapartum sepsis, chorioamnionitis, all this predispose to neonatal sepsis and neonatal meningitis. All this again can predispose to the development of hydrocephalus as well as cerebral atrophy and microcephaly. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, go on to the next.
Immunization history. Child is fully immunized.
You have gone to immunization straight. Now you have told antenatal, natal, postnatal, developmental history. That is the order.
Developmental history. Motor, the child is not able to sit without support.
Okay.
And has poor head control.
Has?
Poor head control.
Okay.
Cognitive, the child can transfer objects from one hand to other.
Surya, can you switch on your video?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because I'm having a feeling I'm talking to the phone. Switch it on. Yes, thank you. Okay. Then.
Cognitive development. The child can transfer objects from one hand to the other.
Okay.
The child can turn pages.
Okay. Turn pages, Napa 9 months tanapa sonna? You have not asked properly. Okay, then.
Language, the child can say bisyllable words.
Okay.
Social development, the child can recognize strangers.
Okay, so stranger anxiety is there. Okay.
So the inference is there's gross motor developmental delay.
Okay, so gross motor delay is there. Okay. 1 minute. In the history, there is one point you please note down. In the CNS history, with regard to the motor system, we should ask history of stiffness of lower limbs. Whether the mother is having any difficulty in changing diapers, because the lower limbs can become spastic in hydrocephalus because of stretching of the corticospinal fibers. Okay, that history is important because we will tell that in examination also. Okay. Continue.
Family history. No history of consanguineous marriage. The child is only child in the family.
So this history of consanguineous marriage is important mainly in microcephaly, because in microcephaly we have got primary genetic microcephaly and secondary non-genetic. Okay, so in the primary genetic there is a genetic basis, so family history is important. And family history with regard to hydrocephalus, later on I will tell. That is, hydrocephalus is one cause for macrocephaly. Okay, the other causes for macrocephaly, like familially large head, familial megalencephaly. So for that, family history of similar large head or family history of small head is important. So when you are presenting a case of microcephaly, you will ask history of whether any other family members are having small head. And also when you are presenting a case of hydrocephalus, because the overall hydrocephalus is just one DD for macrocephaly. So other DD for macrocephaly is megalencephaly. So that can be present in family. So family history is important. Okay, then
Then past history, there's no previous hospital admission of surgeries.
okay. See, when you present pediatric case, no, you get to take a pediatric case sheet. It will be present in the wards. In that order, you're supposed to present. Okay, so this past history never comes here. You tell that after the history of present illness, you tell history of hospitalization, previous treatment, and all. So once you tell development history, dietetic history, you go to family, socio-economic history, and then allergy, contact, immunization. Okay. Okay, then family history you have told, allergy, then contact history is important because this mother is telling only at 6 months of age the mother noted hydrocephalus. Am I correct? 9 months baby, 6 months she noted, correcta? Say yes or no.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so history of tuberculosis is very important because still in our country we are having lot of cases of tuberculosis, and one of the common organisms which causes hydrocephalus and meningitis is TB meningitis. Okay, so contact history is important for this child. Okay, then. So can we go to presentation? Examination findings.
Examination, general examination. The
Okay.
child is lethargic, not very active or alert. Afebrile, no pallor, express cyanosis, lymphadenopathy, edema, clubbing.
Okay.
Vitals, pulse rate is 120 per minute, regular, normal volume.
Okay.
BP 90/60. Respiratory rate 45 per minute. Anthropometry, height is 70 centimeter, weight 10 kg, head circumference is 54 centimeter.
How much?
54 centimeter.
54. Okay.
So height and weight are normal. Head circumference is increased.
Head circumference is
increased.
Okay. See, you should for whenever you tell anthropometry, you should tell the weight is in which centile it is. You can carry those anthropometric charts even in your exam. So you have to tell in which centile it falls. The same for length also. Okay, you told length or height for this child?
Length.
Length da sonniya, correcta?
Height.
Okay, good. Okay, so length, weight for length, and then you should tell head circumference. 9-month child ingadnala mid-arm circumference. Apra? Because Sam, for Sam, when nowadays we are seeing mid-arm circumference also. Then, because you have told poor feeding, so we should know whether the poor feeding has affected the nutritional status of the child. So because the nutrition status, if it is malnutrition, you will add on to your final diagnosis. So weight for length, you should tell head circumference in which centile it falls. Okay. Okay, then.
Head to toe examination. Head is enlarged, scalp shiny with dilated veins.
Very good. Then?
Anterior fontanelle is bulging.
Okay.
No facial anomalies, no cleft lip or cleft palate, no spinal anomalies.
Directly you went to spine. What about the other findings on the head, man? You have written or not written, or I will tell. No problem, no problem. Okay. So what are all the head to foot findings you will see in a case of hydrocephalus? In the head, first large head. Okay. It will be very obvious. And frontal bossing. And then the occiput. How the occiput is. Why the occiput is very important? Because two conditions. There is Arnold-Chiari malformation and Dandy Walker cyst. In Arnold-Chiari malformation, what happens? the cerebellar tonsil herniates. Okay, so the occiput will be flat. It is said to be foreshortened in Arnold-Chiari malformation. Understood? Whereas in Dandy Walker, what happens? There is a posterior fossa cyst because there is a developmental defect in the fourth ventricle development, the roof of the fourth ventricle. So what happens? The CSF accumulates there, it produces a large cyst. So the occiput will become prominent in Dandy Walker. Okay, and then what? And then you will see the fontanelles. You should look for the open posterior fontanelle also. Okay, so anterior fontanelle is wide open and bulging, you have told. Whether it is pulsatile or non-pulsatile, you should tell. Did you tell? Whether it is pulsatile or non-pulsatile, you should tell. And then the dimensions of the anterior fontanelle, you should tell. Okay, so dimensions, how will you measure the anterior fontanelle? What is the shape of the anterior fontanelle? It is diamond
Rhomboid.
shape. Diamond shape. Okay. So how will you measure the size of the anterior fontanelle? Can you draw and show? I'll see if I've got a piece of paper. Okay, so the size of the anterior fontanelle you should tell. Then what else? Then you told dilated veins in the scalp, you told. On the face, you told. Okay, other findings on the face, you told dysmorphism also, you told presence of cleft lip, cleft palate. And then?
Sunset appearance in the eye.
Yes, very good. What is that sunset sign?
Downward gaze.
There is a persistent downward gaze. Why? Because there is upward gaze palsy. Okay, there is difficulty in looking up, gaze palsy. Okay, why does it happen? What is the cause for the sun setting sign?
Compression of the suprapineal recess.
Okay, suprapineal recess, where does it compress? Where does it compress? The suprapineal recess of which ventricle, pa? Suprapineal recess of the third ventricle compresses on the tectum. Okay. See, this is the anterior fontanelle, you imagine. This is a diamond shape. Okay. You will measure the dimension in this way. Okay. Like this. So you will tell us normal size will be 2.5 by 2.5 centimeter. Do you understand? You will not measure like this. You will measure the anterior fontanelle like this. Okay. Okay, then what else you will look for in the head? What is transillumination?
Translucency.
Yes, with the help of a torch, you will keep the torch and look for transillumination. Brilliantly transilluminant will be hydranencephaly, where the entire brain matter will be replaced by cerebrospinal fluid. Whatever the brain is there, only small remnants will be there. Okay, it will just be a fluid-filled sac. That is hydranencephaly. In that, it will be brilliantly transilluminant. Okay, and in hydrocephalus, usually it is not transilluminant. Okay, then what else you will look for in the head?
Cracking pot sign.
Very good. What is crackpot sign? Or another name is?
McEwan's sign.
McEwan's sign. Okay, what is that?
When the head is percussed, the cracking pot sound will be heard.
Yes, that is you either you directly tap or you can crack on the other side. Keep your step on the opposite side. Okay, on one parietal eminence you tap, and on the other side you keep the step and listen to it. How the sound will be? As if you are tapping a cracked pot. This cracked pot sign is significant after sutural closure has occurred. Okay. Once the sutures are closed, it becomes like a pot. Okay. Then hydrocephalus develops. So what happens? The sutural diastasis occurs. So the skull resembles a broken pot. Okay. So in older children, this crackpot sign, presence of this crackpot sign is significant. Okay. In younger children, before the age of sutural diastasis, If crackpot resonance is present, you cannot attach much significance to it. Okay, so after the age of sutural diastasis, the presence of crackpot sign indicates sutural diastasis due to hydrocephalus, increased intracranial tension. Okay, so crackpot sign. Fine. What other thing you will see? You can look for bruit. You can auscultate over the anterior fontanelle, over the eyeballs. You can auscultate for bruit because one condition which causes hydrocephalus is veil of Galen malformation. This veil of Galen is a midline structure. It becomes big and then compresses upon the causes obstruction to the ventricular system. In that case, you will have bruit over the skull. Okay, now we can now come to the face. In the face, you have already told cleft lip, cleft palate. It can be part of any syndromes. It can be part of intrauterine infection. In the eyes, you have told sunset sign. Other finding in the eyes, presence of other finding in the eye, you will have cataract can be present. Okay, so cataract as part of intrauterine infections. Okay, then you will you have told the face. Then the overall neurocutaneous markers you have not told. In any CNS case, you have to look for neurocutaneous markers. In this case, presence of Caffiole spots, presence of neurofibromas, because hydrocephalus can be part of those conditions. Okay, can we proceed?
And there are no signs of dehydration.
Okay, then
CNS examination.
okay.
The child is lethargic. Cranial nerves are normal except there is upward gaze palsy.
Yeah, that is good, because in EOM, when you tell 3, 4, 6 cranial nerves, you have to tell there is sunsetting sign and upward gaze palsy is present. What is the other cranial nerve you will look for? You have told the child is having vomiting. You should look for lateral rectus palsy, because abducens nerve palsy can occur when there is increased intracranial tension. Okay, then
Motor, the resting posture is normal. Resting tone is normal. There's poor head control.
Okay, fine. I'll just tell what findings you should look for. In motor system examination, apart from the other things, you should specifically look for spasticity in the lower limbs. Okay, so in the presence of spasticity, exaggerated deep tendon reflexes and extensor plantar, all this suggests that the corticospinal tract, the pyramidal tract, okay, as it comes beside the lateral ventricle, there is stretching because of dilatation of the lateral ventricle. So this stretching can cause spasticity of the lower limbs. Okay, then sensory and all, leave. Then cranial nerves you have told. Then cerebellar signs.
Deep tendon reflexes are normal.
Okay, then. We'll brush through for another 15 minutes.
Primitive reflexes absent.
Okay, then. That's all. Cranial nerves you have told. Okay, then spine and cranium you have to tell. That is important. Did you examine the back? Did you examine the back? That you have to see, no? What all you will look for in the back? Whether there are any swelling in the back, midline swelling. It can be a lipoma. It can be a lipomeningocele. Okay. Whether there is any tuft of hair. Whether there is any midline sinus or dimple. All that can indicate a neural tube defect, and in any neural tube defect, hydrocephalus can be an associated finding. Okay, then so spine and cranium you have told. Then other system examination, what all you will see in the other systems, especially in the abdomen, you will look for hepatosplenomegaly, because in intrauterine infections you will be having hepatosplenomegaly. Okay, now can we, so the diagnosis is
hydrocephalus with no.
The diagnosis is macrocephaly, because hydrocephalus is a CT diagnosis. Hydrocephalus means dilatation of the ventricles. Okay, so the diagnosis is macrocephaly, most probably hydrocephalus. Okay, so how will you investigate this child?
MRI brain.
So directly, I don't know how you are expected in the final year exam, but usually we tell basic investigations where you will look for CBC, then renal function test, liver function test, because this child may be requiring surgery, and then specific investigations. In specific investigations, you can tell imaging in the form of CT brain or MRI. Okay, so in that you will look for what? Dilatation of the ventricles. Okay, and then in the CT you will be able to identify intracerebral calcifications. These calcifications can be present in intrauterine infections. In X-ray skull, is there any finding? Some beaten appearance. Either copper beaten or silver beaten appearance. Okay, because whenever there is increased intracranial tension, what will happen? The brain, no, it will go and compress. There is edema. It will compress upon the inner aspect of the skull. So that convolutions, no, they will produce indentations. So that will give the appearance of beaten silver or beaten copper. Okay, so copper beaten appearance or silver beaten appearance. That you will look for in the X-ray skull. Okay. And so now you have investigated, now you have identified the cause of hydrocephalus. You have identified that the child is having hydrocephalus. So then how will you treat the child?
The management of increased intracranial tension, we have to give osmotic diuretics.
Yes, okay. So there is medical management and surgical management. Medical management, you give diuretics like acetazolamide to reduce the CSF flow. But is it a permanent solution? No. Okay, so you have to proceed with shunting of the dilated ventricles. So you can do a ventriculoperitoneal shunt. That is the most common thing done. Okay. The other types of shunts are also there. Like that is you just create a pathway for the CSF to drain. Okay. So what you can do a ventriculoperitoneal shunt, ventriculoatrial, ventriculopleural. Okay. So other types of shunts are there, but the most common done is ventriculoperitoneal shunt. Okay. Now, with regard to your exam questions, how does the CSF flow occur? Where is the CSF produced? You have studied or not? All of you, other students, not only Surya, because Surya has switched on the video, I am seeing him. Other people also can answer.
Ma'am, choroid plexus.
Very good. It is produced in the choroid plexus and to some extent from the ependymal lining of the ventricles. Okay. So how does it flow? Can anyone tell?
Ma'am, from lateral ventricle through the foramen of Monro to the third ventricle.
Yes.
And then from the third ventricle through aqueduct of Sylvius, it goes to the fourth ventricle.
Yes.
From the fourth ventricle, it goes to the spinal cord via foramen of Magendie.
Okay.
And
from the
laterally, it can go to.
There are 3 foramina, 2 lateral foramina of Luschka, which is paired.
Foramen of Luschka.
And 1 midline foramina, median foramina, that is Magendie, that is unpaired. Okay. So from there it exits and then it goes, flows over the spinal cord, flows over the cerebral cortex, cerebellum, everywhere, and then where does it drain? Where is it absorbed? Absorption where does it occur? It in the superior sagittal sinus via the arachnoid villi. Okay. Understood. So, when will you tell it is an obstructive hydrocephalus? When will you tell it is a non-obstructive or communicating hydrocephalus? Any obstruction within this ventricular system is obstructive hydrocephalus. Okay. Any obstruction outside the ventricular system is communicating hydrocephalus or non-obstructive hydrocephalus. That is in the foramen of Monro or third ventricle or aqueduct of Sylvius or foramen of Luschka and Magendie. If the obstruction is in this level, it is an obstructive hydrocephalus. If the obstruction is in the subarachnoid space, when does it occur? Whenever there is meningitis, the inflammatory response is exuberant. It produces lot of exudates. All the exudates will settle down in the base of the brain. They will occlude the cerebral flow, the CSF flow there at the level of the cisterns. We have studied cisterns in anatomy, no? A lot of cisterns are there. They are just spaces where the CSF gets collected. The interpeduncular cistern, so many other cisterns are there. I've forgotten the name. So all that when the exudates will settle down. Sometimes when there is an intracranial bleed, subarachnoid bleed, the bleed will settle down. So it blocks the exit of the CSF from within the ventricular system to the superior sagittal sinus. Okay, so obstruction within the ventricular system is obstructive hydrocephalus. Outside the ventricular system is non-obstructive or communicating hydrocephalus. So this is with regard to the obstruction. One another cause for hydrocephalus is excess production of CSF. That is pretty much less common, but it can occur in choroid plexus papillomas. Okay, and what else? So now when you read the etiology, you will understand how the obstruction occurs. Neonatal meningitis all will cause an inflammatory response. Inflammation will always be followed by fibrosis, gliosis, there is obstruction. Similarly in bleeds. Okay, and then congenital, what happens? Aqueduct of Sylvius can be forked. Okay, that is, it can be forked or obstructed congenitally also. Okay, and one of the infections which can cause aqueductal stenosis is mumps. So that can also lead to hydrocephalus. And then congenital hydrocephalus, other causes is it can in Arnold Chiari, Dandy Walker. Okay, understood? Okay, okay. Then what else? So with this is about the CSF pathways. This can be asked in the exam. So you have to draw the CSF pathway. Okay, and then what are all the complications? So the child can have seizures, the child can have mental retardation, visual disturbances can be present, delayed development in all the milestones. Then there can be gait abnormalities, gait disturbances. Okay, and then after shunt also, the shunt can get obstructed, the shunt can get infected. The shunt can migrate to other places. Sometimes you can find the whole shunt within the ventricle. The whole shunt can be present inside the abdomen. Okay, so all these are complications of shunting. Okay, so then sometimes what happens? The normal CSF pathways will close because once it goes through the tube, there is no role in the other CSF pathways are not used. So the patient can become dependent on the shunt. Okay, and sometimes over drainage of CSF can occur. The ventricles will become slit-like, very small. That also should not occur. That is why all the shunt systems have got pressure valves. Okay, so they prevent over drainage. Understood? Okay, so this is about hydrocephalus. A few points about micro. Hey, understood, Appa? Are we clear about hydrocephalus?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You know, 2 or 3 people open your mouth and answer, man. I mean, open your mouth. Sorry, got to switch on the audio and answer. Any doubts till now?
No, ma'am. Everything is fine.
Ma'am, in CNS cases, how do we examine for cranial nerves, ma'am, for the small children? Is it not
Small
difficult?
children. This is not as easy as adults, but we can examine. I'll finish microcephaly and I'll tell you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
With regard to microcephaly, that is, for macrocephaly, we have to take the measurement. We have to measure, and when we interpret, we take it as within 2 standard deviations. Always remember there is a difference. Okay. Do you remember standard deviation? You would have studied in SPM statistics. Do you remember?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
That is, when the values for the entire population are plotted, it will be present in a bell-shaped curve. There is a mean, and then you have within the values within 1 standard deviation. Okay, 1 standard deviation, and then within 2 and within 3. For macrocephaly, we take 2 standard deviations because we want to have the values within a small bracket, so that early itself you can identify the etiology and treat, because there are some treatable causes of macrocephaly like hydrocephalus, subdural empyema, subdural effusions. Got it? Whereas for microcephaly, the standard deviation is 3 standard deviation, because usually the causes of microcephaly are you cannot reverse. The causes are, as I told earlier, familial causes. There is a genetic basis, and then acquired causes are secondary microcephaly, intrauterine infections, trauma, radiation, hyperpyrexia, and primary microcephaly can be also part of syndromes, familial microcephaly, it can be autosomal recessive, it can be autosomal dominant, and also it can be part of syndromes like Russell-Silver syndrome, Cry-Duchat syndrome. Okay. And then secondary microcephaly also you have got syndromes acquired like fetal Hayden-Toyne syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome. So once the brain atrophies and becomes small, you can't go back and make it grow. Okay, so it is almost irreversible. You can only give rehabilitation to the child. You can give early stimulation to the child. Okay, so for microcephaly, always remember small head, 3 standard deviation, large head, 2 standard deviation. You remember this is a common mistake which even postgraduates do. So you please note it down and you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so this is about microcephaly, primary, secondary, and the DD for microcephaly is craniosynostosis, where the sutures are closed easily, early closure of the sutures. Okay, and there you will have ridging of the sutures will be present. Okay, and we've got another 2 or 3 minutes. Shortly I will tell. Hey, understood, Appa? Microcephaly will be a short note for you, or it can be a spotter also. And there also the same findings you will look for. Head to foot examination for intrauterine infection, neurocutaneous markers, and in addition in primary microcephaly, which is intrauterine onset, the forehead will be slanting and the ears and all will be prominent because the brain has not developed. So the moment you see a very small head with slanting forehead, prominent ears, you can be almost sure that the onset is intrauterine. Okay. Then what else? Examination of cranial nerves. First is olfactory. Olfactory usually, you know, whenever the baby is able to turn the head towards to feed, you can take it as an indirect sign that the olfactory is working. But other than that, formally it is difficult to test. And with regard to the optic is you have to whether the child is able to recognize the mother's face. Are you having any? What book are you following for pediatric examination? Not following any book? Aruchami, yeah. There is one clinical methods, Meherban Singh. Okay. Or clinical methods, Santosh Kumar. You just go take a Xerox of the pages of pediatric clinical examination system wise. That will be very helpful. Okay. Because going to be time up. And it is difficult. The examination of cranial nerves per se, it will take 1 hour for discussion. Okay. I think Soundarya asked that question. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Soundarya, that is one big discussion per se, ma. So
Okay,
better will be you take Xerox of these pages.
Okay, ma'am.
And you go through that. Okay. It is not difficult to examine when compared to adults. All we do is we do it informally. Okay, like for 3, 4, 6, for example, no, you show a bright colored toy in front of the child, and then you see whether the child follows that toy in all the 4 directions. So that is indirectly you are seeing the extraocular movements. Okay, and then you look for the pupillary reflex, and then for a 5th cranial nerve, for example, you can give a biscuit to the child and see whether the child is able to chew well. Okay, and then sensations of on the face. The mother will tell whether the child is able to feel whenever she touches on the face. Okay, and then with regard to the 7th cranial nerve, obviously when the child is smiling or when the child is crying, whether there is any deviation, and then when the child is sleeping, whether the child is able to close eyes fully, whether there is any Bell's phenomenon, the mother will be able to tell. The child is sleeping only with one eye open. Okay, like that the mother will tell. And then whether there is any for 3, 4, 6 drooping of eyelids is there, but that you can ask. Like that for each cranial nerve, analogous history is there. It will be given in detail in Santosh Kumar or Meherban Singh. Okay, it will be there in every ward. One of you just take a Xerox of those pages and go through that.
Yes, ma'am.
Whatever we discussed today, are we clear? Do you have any other doubts? I have just given a gist of it, man. Go and read your OP guide. Any other doubts?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other points for clarification?